You ever have one of those days? I had one of those days. All losses all the time until this deck saved my life, my climb, my season. Let's take a look. One of the main struggles that I've had during this season is the lack of functional mid-range decks. There are so many decks that just go drastically over the top, like Hela and Bounce, or to some extent the move decks as well. These decks are able to make mid-range decks as we know them very hard to actually make work. The closest thing most people are seeing is these Scream Curve decks, which I think are okay, but they don't really hit the spot for me the way something like this does. This deck was cooked up by YoWoody, and I had a 14-2 record with it in Top Infinite. I was very happy with how it played out, but more importantly, it scratched an itch that this metagame has not been able to scratch for me so far. Every time I played a sort of smaller ball type of Agent Venom deck, I got run over by bounce stuff, but this deck, with the power of Iron Man in it, is able to compete with Bounce and Hela on points and sometimes just straight up win, to surprise people with cards like Claw, winning locations that are closed off, to generate a lot of points and power with the Thena package, and to interact with what your opponent is trying to do with Cosmo. This combination of cards is what makes this deck tick on the whole. One of the strongest cards in the entire deck is, of course, Agent Venom. But unlike other Agent Venom decks, we are built in such a way that we have a backup for Agent Venom in the form of Bast. This is not a common thing in a lot of Agent Venom decks for good reason. It's usually not all that great to play a Bast. But however, in this deck, where you really need those extra points, where you really need that Mystique and that Iron Man and that Thena and that Cassandra Nova and that Silver Sable and that Kitty Pryde to have extra oomph to them in a metagame that goes as tall as this one, it actually does make sense. I'm not saying you need to go throw this card into all of your other Agent Venom decks, but what I am saying is that this deck benefits from it thanks primarily to Iron Man and Mystique, but secondarily to those other cards that really help you get more points on the board than you otherwise should. The rest of this deck should be fairly recognizable to you. It looks a lot like the shells that are trying to be Darkhawk decks, except it just goes taller because Iron Man and Claw are just better than Darkhawk. Darkhawk is at his best when you're really getting a lot of value out of the card and your Mystiques are getting a lot of value as well. This is just doing more points than those decks, and you don't have to play the awkward Korg, the awkward Rock Slide. You get to play cards that actually put points on the board instead, and that really matters as well, because you have something like Speed, who can be a 3/9, who can carry a buff from a Agent Venom very, very reasonably, instead of a Rock Slide, who is only a 3/3 or a 3/4. You have a card like Silver Sable instead of Korg, because Silver Sable after a Bast is a 5-power card, Silver Sable after an Agent Venom is a 6-power card, Korg is either 2 or 4. And these sort of marginal gains are important, but also the non-marginal gains are important. It's way better to hit an Iron Man with one of those cards than it is to hit a Darkhawk. Way better. Game-changingly better. Life-changingly better. And so for this reason, I think a lot of people are going to look at this deck and say, wait, you should just be playing Darkhawk. I think it's the other way around. I think the Darkhawk decks should be playing this. Bast is your backup Agent Venom. One thing that I think is worth pointing out is that you really want to get value out of this card. There's a lot of times where you're just not ever wanting to play this card on turn 1. I have held it until turn 2, turn 3, so I'm really hitting stuff that I want to be hitting. But you can also fire it off if your hand is good enough early in the game. What this card is meant to do is cover you in scenarios where Agent Venom isn't. Between Bast and Agent Venom, you should usually have a 3 or 4 power Mystique, a 3 or 4 power Iron Man, and you'll be able to use either one of them to get more value than those cards are designed to have. The basic theory of Bast is that, yes, dramatically worse than Agent Venom, but you're not always drawing Agent Venom, and even when you do, a lot of the cards in your deck are built to work with Agent Venom, meaning they also work with Bast. She ends up just being a very easy inclusion here. I have found absolutely nothing wrong with her, and she very often plays for a large number of points that are almost incalculable, right? Like the only actual bad hit you can possibly get is like a claw, and claw going from 4 to 3 doesn't really matter. It's not amazing, but it's not bad by any means. You're just totally fine with that almost every time. Even the marginal gains on cards like Kitty Pryde and Thena are going to be relevant. They're going to be impactful. It's good to get those gains on a Cassandra Nova, on a Kitty Pryde, on a Thena, on a Silver Sable. This card is actually quite good, and I honestly did not expect that. We're a Thena deck, so we play Kitty Pryde. It's no secret that I enjoy playing Kitty Pryde decks, and this deck is not the world's greatest Kitty Pryde deck. She's good and fine and useful, but it's not really about her. You're just happy to have a Kitty Pryde that's like 6 power that you can play alongside some other stuff. Get your Thena bigger. That's really what Kitty is trying to do. This deck does want a lot of 1-drops, and it especially wants to have a 1-drop some of the time on turn 6. And so Kitty Pryde is usually going to be a very effective card in that role, but it's hardly like the make or break for this deck. I just think it really smooths out a lot of the draws in such a way that is kind of irreplaceable because it's so strong when it's good, and because even when it's bad, it's giving you something to do. Silver Sable's just a strong 1-drop, and this deck, like I said, is very interested in weaving 1-drops into the curve because it is, of course, a Thena deck as well, and because sometimes on the final turn of the game, you'll want to be playing like Iron Man plus 1-drop or Claw plus 1-drop. You want those 1-drops to have as much power as possible. That's really what Kitty and Silver Sable are doing in this situation, and that's what allows them to be a little bit better than the Darkhawk stuff, because they're always usually going to be bigger than a Korg. And that matters a lot, surprisingly, because of how many games come down to that final turn. 5+1. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you're getting like a Mystique plus a couple ones. That's also like, well, usually when that's happening, you're winning by a lot because you're copying either a Claw or an Iron Man there, and it's just like the most broken thing of all time. I've had multiple games where I had 2 Iron Men in a lane. Like, it's just a very powerful thing to do and a very, very reasonable point allocation system. But this deck fundamentally trades on efficiency. It wants the most bang it can possibly get for its buck all the way up the curve. It wants all of its cards to work with Agent Venom. It wants all of its cards to work with Bast. And Silver Sable passes all of those tests with flying colors. Efficient stats, works with Agent Venom, works with Bast. There really isn't much else to say about what Thena does in this deck. Great with Agent Venom, great with Bast, very efficient stats. Those are really, like, if you're looking to replace cards and put cards in here, that's what you want those cards to be. I think she is by far the best in slot for this kind of deck because she is just one of the only cards that is going to be able to be big stats on her own. And when you are an Iron Man deck, it's actually very important to have big stats on your own. Iron Man, remember, scales with the amount of power you have on the board. The more you have on the board, the better your Iron Man is. Thena goes crazy, Iron Man goes double crazy. Kate Bishop has basically never been bad, and well, the way I talked about this deck, there is a lot of like, I want stuff to do. I want to take game actions to fill my curve. I want to build to a point that makes a lot of powerful things happen. This is not an amazing deck for this card. Kate Bishop is fine. There's nothing wrong with her. But a lot of the time you are going to be able to do something stronger or to do something a little bit better. That's not to say that it's not a good card. It's just that you are very often going to be prioritizing playing other cards out, whether they be speed or Thena with a 1-drop or things of that nature. But what this card does very well is sort of raise your floor. Because even when you're not doing all the stuff you're built to do, you can still get 1-drops out of this and trigger Thena that way. Like, even if you don't have Kitty Pryde, even if you don't have Silver Sable, if you need some extra 1-drops to keep triggering Thena, this card will do it. You can make an Ant-Man out of this card. You can make sure that your Bast hits the cards that this card creates, because 3 of them are actually really good when that happens. One of them sucks, but that is what it is. And that allows you a lot of freedom. It allows you a lot of additional points. And overall, I would say this is one of the weaker cards in the deck, or one of the less essential ones, but it is an important part of what I would say the engine is. It sort of allows your bad draws to be less bad by just giving you things to do. It might be time for people to start having a conversation about this card. This is an Agent Venom deck before all else. Like, we've talked about a lot of stuff about why this deck makes sense, but fundamentally, the thing this deck is trying to do is 4 power Iron Man, 4 power Mystique, tons of points. And that is important in a metagame like this because the best decks in the game, or at least the most played decks in the game, are decks like Hela and Bounce that are very much trying to win by making big numbers. And you have to be able to compete with a deck like that if you want to play a mid-range deck. And that's the problem that mid-range decks have had, is that you can't actually compete unless you're doing something equally as messed up. And Agent Venom Iron Man stuff is actually equally as messed up. There have been so many games that I've played with this deck where I have gotten like 50 plus points in a lane. Sometimes that involves locations, sometimes that involves double Iron Man, but like this is a deck that can actually just put massive points on the board because of this card specifically. Almost every card in the deck works with this card. When you play him on turn 2, he is basically a 216. An absolute monster of a card. Maybe the closest thing we've seen, not in terms necessarily of power, but in terms of like how much I want to snap when I turn to this guy. The only card I can compare him to is the way we used to play Zabu. You turn to Zabu, and then if they didn't turn to Zabu, it was like, I really have to think about snapping here. Agent Venom is kind of like that. The numbers are that good. Cassandra Nova is, we talked about the 3 categories of what makes a card be good in a deck like this. Work with Bast, work with Agent Venom, be efficient points. That's really all you need. And this card does that very easily. If you Bast her and then you play her on turn 3, she is 9 power, plus the ones that she takes away from your opponent. You're very happy with that. If you Agent Venom her and then you draw her, she's going to be pretty big as well, even later into the game. And that sort of makes her a better top deck later than she otherwise would be, because a lot of the time when you play a Cassandra Nova deck, the issue you run into, especially with a Thena deck, is you don't want to play her on turn 3 because you want to proc the Thena, and then on 4, she has 1 less power, and it's like, what am I even doing here? Bast really helps there. Agent Venom really helps there. It makes her a better top deck. It makes her a better card that you can more easily weave into your curve. She's just efficient. Again, we talk about all the bells and whistles here, but fundamentally the cards this deck wants as filler are efficient stat sticks that work with Bast and work with Agent Venom. She is exactly that. Mystique is a beast. This card with 4 power copying an Iron Man we're basically Mr. Negative levels. Like, it's not literally Mr. Negative because you're still paying energy for your stuff, but the power output can genuinely approach that because you also aren't as reliant on Mr. Negative actually happening. Like, this is an absolutely monstrous card copying Iron Man, but I don't want you to sleep on copying Claw, because in a matchup against the deck that isn't pushing the ceiling that high, a deck that is trying to beat the ceiling pusher decks with like Clog and stuff like that, having Claw to just like, oh, you clogged me? Guess you didn't clog me? Extremely powerful option. Double Claw, ridiculous, right? You Claw as a 5-cost card. Mystique copies this with 4 power because of an Agent Venom as a 3-cost card with the same stats as a 5-cost card. Almost impossible to predict what your final turn is going to be. Very, very, very difficult. And the one tip I'm going to give you is whenever you're playing with this deck, always order so the last card you played on those later turns is Iron Man or Claw. So it gives you the option to copy it with Mystique. I realize this seems basic, but I'm trying to add more tips that are like legitimately important here. Don't be like, oh, it's turn 5. I'm going to play, not that. It's turn 5. I have 6 energy because I got like an extra energy from a location. I'll play Claw and then a Kitty Pryde. Don't do that. Don't do that. It will come up. Don't do it. Cosmo is one of the most important cards in the metagame right now. It works against Hela, it works against Bounce, and it is an incredibly useful card in those matchups. It doesn't just work against that, though. If you can take priority, it works against things like Juggernaut as well. These are very common ways for your opponent to try to win the game. I would go so far as to say the amount of, the amount of on-reveal turn 6 game winners right now is as high as I can remember it in a long time. Between Hela, between Shadow King, all of the cards that I previously mentioned, this card does have some real relevance. You can also use it to mess up some telegraphed bounce plays. In one of the games that you're going to see a bit later, I use a turn 4 Cosmo in order to prevent them from having an easy bounce to like where they played a Sage to beast up. Like when they telegraph those, you can end up with priority and you can blow them out by playing a card like Cosmo. That kind of stuff is very important to keep in mind because as you'll see in the gameplay footage, if I had not played for priority that turn, it wouldn't have worked. And then it ended up being very important on turn 6. So it is important to keep in mind when this card is good, because when it is good, it is one of the best cards in the game. Copying Mystique into an Iron Man and then turning off whatever interaction they wanted to have is unbelievably powerful, and that is another one of your possible turn 6s. Much like Thena and Cassandra Nova, this is a card that is simply good stats that doesn't get completely obliterated by Bast or by Agent Venom the way that something like a Copycat or a Gladiator would. And so it ends up just being a much more relevant piece of cardboard. None of these cards aren't cardboard, but I'm used to like Magic the Gathering. So when I talk about something, it's like, this is a piece of cardboard. And it's not actually cardboard. Piece of digital cardboard? I don't know. A piece of digital card gaming equipment? Let me know in the comments what it is. Anyway, it ends up being a much more relevant game piece than the other things that you would like to replace it with. I think you could try Sage, but the issue with Sage is that it's probably fine, but it's just so much worse to just curve out. And I think your turn 6s are so often spoken for with like 5 into 5+1 stuff that you often aren't going to get as much out of Sage as you would otherwise want. Iron Man is the reason this deck works, straight up. Like, yes, Agent Venom is, yes, Bast is, but this deck wouldn't have a reason to exist if it weren't for Iron Man. We'd just be playing Darkhawk, and we wouldn't be going tall enough. Iron Man is what allows you to go tall enough to be this kind of deck. This kind of deck cannot compete with the decks that go that much taller if you do not have Iron Man in it. It just can't. And Iron Man ends up being the most important card to draw in all of your matchups against Hela, in all of your matchups against Bounce. This is the card. Iron Man, Mystique, and Cosmo, after you Agent Venom onto, that's the thing you're trying to do. And this card being as strong as it is, getting your numbers as big as they do, is the whole reason a deck that still mopes around with Thena stuff is able to exist. I don't want to let you sleep on Claw, right? Like, I just sucked off Iron Man dramatically. I was effusive in my praise. I glazed the hell out of Iron Man. I don't want that to make you think that Claw sucks or anything like that. This card is also just phenomenal. Like, just an absolute beast mode card that people do not expect, that has additional utility against Clog, that is just generally great on rate, and doubling it with Mystique makes your final turns so awkward and so hard to predict that against any deck that is playing a normal type of game plan that isn't trying to go super tall, it is very often better than Iron Man because of how unpredictable it can be. Claw is law. Great card. All right, y'all, thank you so much for making it through to this part of the video. We're going to jump into some gameplay from here, and I wanted to give a final shout out to my boy YoWoody, without whom this deck would not exist, and I would not have gone 14-2. I'm so happy I can play a deck like this in the metagame. It has been something that is missing from my life for a while. I was desperate. I was playing Hela. I was playing Arishem. I'm just glad I can take a breath and play a deck I really enjoy again. Thank you so much. As always, I've been KM Best. You have been phenomenal. And let's jump in to the gameplay. Kitty. I don't know what's happening. The way I understood it, this deck was meant to try to onslaught the Sarah. But they didn't do that. Okay, that's not good. Goddamn, that's big. That's a kitty, that's a surfer, we still win. Alright. Hell of a strong guy. Understand what happened. Weird, isn't it? Yeah, it is weird. It's super weird. Why do they have a Kyera? Surely I just draw Iron Man here. Okay, I mean... I guess I die? Are they tribunaling me? With Kyera? I feel like Kyera makes that more likely, not less likely. Let's just give it to him. Go nuts. Go nuts, my dude. Oh, we guessed wrong. They're moving it to the middle. I just kind of want to see the big guy. Wait, what? Wait, what? Okay, they just didn't draw the tribunal. I wanted to see if they could get like a fucking 256 tribunal or some shit. That would have been cool as hell. Have been mean to me about it recently, so I feel like I should warn you. I'm gonna hold the Bast for at least another turn, I think. I'd love to draw an Agent Venom. Ew. I hate that. My claw. Oh, man. Holy shit. Do we actually? No way, right? 31. Let's go! Let's go! We scammed out of it once again. Do you think Leader should get an OTA boost? Hell no. Maybe the most believable thing, actually. Like, incredibly believable, actually, that would happen. It's unbelievable because I don't know math. I mean, that's relatable. It's a fucking mirror, Jimmy. Now all your cars are 3s. Yeah, the times you miss in Fire Emblem with a 95% hit chance, aka every time I've ever played Fire Emblem. Like, literally all of them. 100% of those times. Imagine a location where all the honor reveals you play on it would happen for your opponent. I don't want to imagine that location. Fuck. That sounds awful. wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm ordering this correctly. Mystique, Claw, Silver Sable. We'll see. So we do have a lot of points on Washington, D.C. here, right? Like, we have 2 Iron Men on... We go to 40. We go to 40 on D.C. Twitch drop is bugged? You're not the first person I've seen say that, honestly. What I'm afraid of is like a Cosmo or some shit. Okay. We tie that. We're about to tie-break win, I think. Yeah, we're about to tie-break win this game. We're about to tie both lanes. Are you ready for this? We're tying both lanes? Oh, wait, no. Oh, yeah, it is 40. Okay, yeah, I did math correctly. 48, and then we win the left. It's rough. All right, I see we're not Bast gaming this time around. Nebula. 64 on Series 5. I'm sorry, but that's just very stupid. I love that you're like, I'm sorry, but, you know? I think that rocks. What is playing Nebula Nico? It's like a Wiccan deck that didn't get stuff. All right, I've got no idea. I have actually zero clue what's happening. They're beating my ass, bro. Hopefully I beat the Scar. I'm pretty sure I do. Look at your boy. Look at your boy just going absolutely fucking bonkers here. Beating a Scar. -2. Love it. Basic Arrow. Love it. Kitty Pride. Got there. You casual 68 in the middle here, dude. Let's go. I already committed to saving the Bast, so I guess that's just what we're gonna do. So what are they doing? Feels like maybe a Magneto to the left. Jugs, maybe? Yeah. Is that the Jugs? Spoder, man. I believe we win thanks to the card Claw. Shout out to the card Claw. We love it. We love it, folks. This play does not beat Magento. Crime afoot. Lamau. Would you ever want to do custom card reviews? Ooh, I mean, that's kind of an interesting proposition. Maybe. I think it would require a little more work, unfortunately, than I would normally be able to handle. Oh boy, might get kicked. Oh yeah, this Killmonger is ready to show the fuck up and shit on my life, you know? This kill to the Monger, I feel it. All right. Hopefully this just wins by 1 billion. Looking like we're going for winning by 1 billion. This is looking like a win by 1 billion angle here. Yeah. We won by 1 billion. Is Sage, Gladiator, or Copycat a better sub? The answer is none of them because they don't work with these. Like, the reason Speed is here is because he does this. I'm gonna wait till next turn. The only possible reason I would not want to wait till next turn is if I draw Agent Venom. In which case, I'm just very happy anyway. I don't think you should necessarily buy speed. That's some scary shit. Okay, am I Tribunal dead now? 64. Oh, okay, thank God. I was like, holy shit, am I about to fall victim to the livingest Tribunal? You probably want Kate Bishop, she goes in a lot of stuff, and then it's like really just archetype specialization. It's really much more about archetype specialization at that point. Just want to leave myself the option. scary. Really scary. So if I get chugged here, if I get chugged here, do I beat Seaball? Fuck no. Trust fill. I was thinking about filling, but we can't because of the flooded, right? We beat Magento by a lot, though. We beat Magento by a lot. Woody, we love it.